Sound check.
Yeah, man.
Can you hear me clear?
That's great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
No worries.
So what were you saying there? When you kind of figure out there's life beyond the 9 to 5,
Yeah.
Monday to
Absolutely.
Friday corporate. I mean, I did 8.5 years of it. Loved it. I mean, you kind of buy into the, Unilever, third most sought after company to work for after
Totally.
Google and Apple, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah. Drink the blue Kool-Aid,
Yep.
take your salary and do what you're told.
Yeah,
And-
100%. And I've got some friends that work for Unilever as well, and the same thing. Like I was mentioning to you before we started here, Chris. I
Right.
worked with PepsiCo for about 4 years, and
They're real number drivers too, though.
absolutely, yeah. So a super interesting business. Learned a lot. Would never exchange it for anything.
Me neither.
Fantastic
Yeah.
experience. It actually, I found it's kind of been a great base for my career. Moving into real estate and then kind of going off into my own and having my own business. And I think, I wouldn't change that. But again, it's nicer kind of being able to go out and do things on your own, explore different things, take risks, like you said, in this
100%.
industry.
Well, no risk, no reward, right?
You got it.
And I come from a background, very blue collar.
Okay.
Dad was a commercial lobster fisherman, electrician by trade. Kind of following Grant's footsteps, bought him out, and it was like, you fix something about 20 times before you ever thought about like repairing it.
Absolutely.
And it was like, so you kind of live that life where you kind of worked real hard and you had to save all your money, and that was the key to financial freedom. It's like save your pennies under your mattress, and basically
work the same spot for 30 years. Times have changed.
Well, times have changed, and I very much got brought up in that kind of mindset. Was like, blue collar, if you work real hard, you'll always have a job. And, guys like my old boss, Rick Monroe, God love him, he's like my business dad. I've mentioned it a couple of times.
Sure.
I don't know if he watches this or not, but, any business mover, he's a very smart guy, Bedford guy from Fairview. And he did 32 years, from like Best Foods to like when they merged with Unilever and all that. And it was like, when I come up and like he hired me in 2012, I was like, I want to be Rick Monroe.
Yeah.
Like that was the trajectory I was chasing. And then it was like, first we had an office in Dartmouth, and we had the Sobeys team was there, and we had like I think we had 3 Sobeys cams. We had our Loblaws cam. Yeah. My boss was the co-op cam with another guy, Ralph Sherratt, and the office manager. We had an office executive, like an admin. Yeah, we had a whole full team plus me. I come on in the office to manage the ice cream piece when I did a year as a sales rep. I guess I'm giving you a little background on me. Mm-hmm. So I did about a year with Unilever as a territory rep, and then my boss, Rick, got the ice cream piece slapped on his desk, and he was just like, bro, like I'm doing co-op when the co-op was still a thing. Yep. And he's managing the district sales team that calls on large format retail. So like Sobeys, Superstore, Walmart, Shoppers Drug Mart, the whole bit. He's like, man, I need a guy to help me out, or a gal, whatever. And anyway, I got the nod to be like, hey, do you want to take this kind of junior cam role on? And then it went from that, and we kind of developed it, and it grew because we built it kind of from nothing.
Sure.
And then I was calling on all kind of the DSD, so very much similar to Pepsi, direct store delivery.
Sure.
Ice cream, though, and we didn't have like the trucks and the routes like you guys had. We had to contract it out through the dairy group or the network. And at the time when I started, it was very convoluted. There was Saputo, there was Farmers, there was Northumberland Dairy, there was Scotsburn, there was it was a nut house trying to get anything to the stores and like invoices everywhere. So anyway, I jumped into it 2 feet first as like a 20-year-old would. And at that time, like I was like, like trajectory, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Sure. Yeah.
And, really rode that wave. And then, got to like 5-6 years. It was like, full team. And then they're like, hey, we're going to close the office. We're going to relocate the Sobeys team back to Toronto because we want to centralize big business there. Yeah. Next thing, our office executive obviously went with the office. They shaved off a few cam heads out of our team, and then they moved her over. And then I was kind of like, man, like I got taught like last in, first out, kind of like I was looking at my buddy Rick, and I was like, man, am I like the next on the block? And anyway, so long story short, he was like, and a very good lesson was like, hey man, listen, like you got to just worry about doing you. You're doing great. Worry about what you can control. I'll handle the rest. That's where leaders have to kind of,
Yep.
take on different battles and different responsibilities. But huge value. Definitely probably wouldn't be here today.
Mm-hmm.
And he's definitely taught me a lot of, great life lessons, how to operate,
Sure.
a business, even though it's somebody else's, he ran it like it was his own. And it was good to see, because some people don't do that. But, anyway, enough about me. This is very much supposed to be about you.
Yeah.
So, and the Keystone Capital Group. So I just wanted to kind of start it off, I guess, and thank you so much for coming on, Ryan MacNeil.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
You're the co-founder and president of the KeyCap Group. Yep. And why don't you tell us, I guess we kind of breezed over some of your background, but why don't you just kind of expand a little bit about that and kind of tell us who Ryan MacNeil is and maybe a little bit of hobbies, interests.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here. Cool to hear that we have some similar background in our career experience, and I'll quickly touch on that as well. I echo you in terms of the experience gained from there and kind of laying a foundation to my career. I worked more so on the head office side of things with PepsiCo and a company called Reckitt Benckiser. Worked as a data analyst, category management, so lining the shelf in the store, and finally as a CAM as well, a key account manager. Worked on a couple different accounts, Shoppers, Loblaws. Most recently was Costco, which was a lot of fun. The big bullies at Costco.
They'll bully you around, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But amazing experience in terms of negotiation and sales, analytics, all that stuff. I had an opportunity back in 2017 to move back out east. So I was in Ontario for most of my time in the consumer goods industry. Joined a family business in the same space, in the private mortgage space. My father and uncle had started that business and had ramped it up to that point and were ready to take on a business development manager. So me having the experience in sales, they thought it was a good fit and kind of continue on the family side of that business. That lasted for a couple of years, and we decided we sold that business to a local credit union here in Halifax. And that was kind of, dad and my uncle's retirement plan.
Nice.
They moved away from that, and then I was able to take over leadership of the business under the new parent company. Fantastic experience, kind of built a new team there, got a full 360 of the business, and we grew it, 3 or 4 times the size of it was when we had originally sold. And then, just a couple months back, I decided it was time for me to go off on my own, build something new. I love the space, got excellent connections with the mortgage brokers in Atlantic, Canada, and, a lot of realtors as well. And we decided to start the Keystone Capital Group. And with 3 co-founders, myself and my partners, Zach Muir, who's basically runs our underwriting team. He's the director of credit and risk. And my friend and co-founder Neil Andrino, who I believe is your counterpart at Remax.
Love Neil.
So Neil's been more focused on raising capital for us, and he's basically managing investor relations for Keystone. So
cool.
So the 3 of us are heading this, and it's been great so far. A bit of a whirlwind, but here we are today. We funded a couple deals, and we're planning on doing lots more. So. Hopefully it keeps going well.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Well, thanks for the high-level overview there. And you kind of crushed on one of my questions already, which was, kind of what was life prior to mortgage and the lending industry. So we already kind of got that as consumer goods. So we'll kind of just breeze to the next one. So, I was kind of really excited to kind of explore myself, because this is very much to promote, local businesses and very much a learning in some aspects for myself. So, and obviously the viewers. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what differentiates you guys from like a traditional lender, and maybe who would be best suited to use a product like yours? Sorry if that's a little full
No,
question.
absolutely. That's a great question, Chris. Private funds are intended to be a short-term solution. Okay, so it's typically 12 months or less that is the term of your loan. So there's a variety of reasons it would be needed. So traditional mortgages, you go to your bank or you go to what we'd call a monoline lender, and you may lock in for a 5-year term or 3-year term, and you kind of just go about your business. Private lending is more so strategic. For a variety of reasons. It could be real estate investors, which is a big client profile that we seek. Someone who's looking to acquire a property, maybe they're looking to renovate it and flip it, or they're looking to build a rental portfolio and just kind of expand that out. There's many other scenarios. Bridge financing would be another example where, maybe you're moving from Ontario, you haven't sold your property there yet, but you want to secure a property in Halifax. So, you purchase that property. We can secure what we call a blanket mortgage. So we would do a first charge on the property in Halifax, a second charge on the property in Ontario, and then when that property in Ontario sells, they basically can pay out the loan at that point. And I mentioned the short-term aspect of the loans as well. So typically our loans are fully open term as well, whereas with the bank, you'd have a closed term. So yeah, we're going to be more in the higher rates and fees than you'd find at a bank. But again, I mentioned it's a strategic use, right? So with that open term, you can pay it down or pay it off at any time without any penalty. So often we have a loan that may have a 12-month term, but a client only needs it for 2 or 3 months and then can pay it out and kind of go about their business or refinance it at that point.
So it does provide quite a bit more flexibility depending on, the scenario or property or situation you might need it for.
100%. The key reasons or benefits of private lending would be the speed that we can operate at. So we can close deals very quickly versus, sometimes the lead time at a bank or a bigger lender might be 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
We can turn that around in a matter of days if we have all the documents there. Flexibility, like you mentioned, Chris, super key with us. Flexible in many different ways, but also, especially, I guess I would say with the documents that are required.
Because it's very stringent in the regular
100%.
lending. And that's always like a pain point, like people feel like they're giving away the farm kind of.
Absolutely. And stuff can take time to gather those documents as well. And, often, a bank will string you along for a period of 2 or 3 weeks and say, oh, you didn't give us this document, and that delays it even further, right? So we're very upfront with what we need. We call ourselves document light. So typically we're looking for an appraisal, maybe 3 months bank statements, and that's just simply to confirm the client can service the loan and just confirming basically your taxes are up to date. And that's essentially it. And with that, we can approve. Typically we approve on the same day or within 24 hours of the application coming in. And the funding process is basically as quick as the lawyers can go. So, anywhere from 3 to 7 days typically for something like that.
Wow. So really quick relative to, what the traditional lending institutions and brokers can kind of muster up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what really sets us apart. And that's also increased the popularity and the market share for private lenders over the past several years. We've really seen a shift in the past couple of years. And like I mentioned earlier, growing the business I was with before, and that was in large part due to the demand for private lending across the country, really, but even more so in Atlantic Canada recently. And one thing I didn't mention that's really advantageous for private lending is cash flow as well. So whether that's cash flow for your business or other investments, we offer interest-only payments. So rather than traditional lender, which would be principal plus interest, we're interest only. So you're only the downside of that is that you're only paying towards the interest. You're not paying down any of the principal, but it makes it better from a cash flow perspective on a monthly basis, that you have less cash going towards payments on a monthly basis that you can invest elsewhere.
Yeah, so you can kind of maneuver and manipulate kind of if you got a lean month or, whatever, you can kind of pay the interest.
You got it.
Figure it out from there.
Yep.
That's cool. So you're really killing me with my questions here. Because one of my questions was like, when did you guys identify, the demand and take the leap? Like, when was kind of the point where you're like, okay, hammered the pavement with dad and partner, sold it, got into and grew it again, and now we're kind of, we formed the Key Cap group. Like, what were some of the few, kind of key points that kind of signaled that? Was it the real estate boom, the population growth? Can you speak to any specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. I could expand on that. I'm sorry for keep stealing your questions there, Chris.
Yeah, it's all good. No, that's great. I mean, it makes for a good episode.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So, variety of reasons is the macro answer there, I guess. But the change in the real estate boom locally and nationally across Canada. There's a multitude of factors, though. I'd say, personally, just, having the network within Atlantic Canada with the brokers here. And one thing I didn't mention as well is that we partner with essentially every single deal would be through a mortgage broker, right? We want to be partnered with brokers. They're the ones who are sending us all of our leads, and then they're also assisting the client through that process, because private lending is very strategic. So you want, that broker kind of coaching them saying, this is part A and here's part B and C with how we exit this loan as well.
So consumers still feel that security, although they may be a little bit outside their element.
Exactly.
In the private sector, they still have the traditional guy
Yep.
or gal there kind of massaging things through.
You got it.
Right
It's
on.
part of a longer term play.
Cool. Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. So, that's part of it as well. Other factors, I'd say, just an increase in private lending in general across the country, a need for it, with lots of intraprovincial migration. Like I mentioned, different needs for bridge financing as
Right.
well. And personally, I love the industry as well. Got to do it from the family business perspective. It just kind of evolved from there, and just saw a need for it in general. There wasn't a ton of competition in Atlantic Canada in the space, where there is in Ontario and Western Canada. And so, there's room. There's been a couple popping up in the last couple of years, and we just decided to kind of do the same thing. And we have some differentiation out there, like all lenders do. We kind of have our, unique clientele that we're looking for, and, we're the sandbox that we like to play in, I guess.
Yeah, everybody's got their niche.
Exactly. Everybody's got their niche. And, we just felt we had a good enough team and good enough knowledge base and experience to be able to kind of jump, like you said, 2 feet forward into this industry and have some success out of the gate.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Great answer to the question. So maybe a little bit towards maybe what your role is specifically with the group. I know you're a co-founder and the president. What's kind of the day in the life in, Ryan MacNeil's kind of role at the KeyCap group? Like where do you find you have like the biggest influence, with the team?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's kind of evolving by the minute, just given we're so
Right.
so new to the scene. But I guess main responsibilities would be broker relations, business development, and capital raising. I guess would be the three main things. I mentioned Neil, is doing a lot of the capital raising as well, but that's kind of a team effort in general because you can't fund mortgages without having that capital available. Yeah. So. Part of that is, selling to investors, this great opportunity. We offer excellent return, basically in monthly interest installments to our investors as well. 8 to 10% returns on an annualized basis. So very attractive returns. It's secured to real estate. Mm-hmm. And essentially Keystone would guarantee that return as well. And I also manage, like I said, business development, broker relations. So a lot of my time is spent, marketing towards these brokers, building relationships, expanding on current relationships that I already have, educating them on our products and when's a good time to use private lending. There is, a lot of brokers out there who are well educated in the space, but there's a lot of other ones, and it's justified in some ways where 90% of your portfolio is traditional, what we call A business, I guess, kind of clean cut business that would go to a bank. And then maybe only 10 to 15% is alternative, but that's been growing, like I said. So some brokers would not spend a lot of time on that, so might need a little bit of hand holding or education for the first couple deals. So we try to focus that space as well with brokers. And aside from that, Zach and I work alongside each other every day. He leads the underwriting in terms of adjudicating any deals that come into us, evaluating whether it's a fit for us. And we work together on that just to kind of make sure we're aligned on that. And then basically everything else with starting up a new business, banking and marketing, social media, all that stuff. So learning as I go, and luckily was able to develop some of these skills in past parts of my career, which has been really helpful. But a lot of later nights and some weekends recently, which I don't mind because it's been very exciting kind of getting this started. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I can definitely attest to that. Mm-hmm. Kind of sharing back to our experience with consumer goods, mm-hmm. I've kind of just been, rolled into my third year. And things have really kind of been taken off, and, kind of to touch on some of what you mentioned, in the day in the life of like trying to do, I don't have the best setup. So you kind of got to meander your
making it work.
Through. Yeah. So what was I saying? When you're kind of getting everything off the ground running and you're kind of really lean, kind of skeleton crew, minimum viable product, so to speak. Yep. There's a few later nights and evenings and weekends, but you take the flexibility out of other places too, which is nice. So it's like, especially for me, like I noticed and, kind of exactly how we met, which is kind of proves it works to a degree. Social media reels, obviously I wanted to know a little bit about private lending. Yep. Well, I know Neil, I follow Neil. Well, boom, next thing, Key Cap Group. I was like, oh, wow, that's private lending. Let's see what this guy's up to. He's always up to something.
Cool. Yeah.
And, that kind of led us to kind of come in here. So has that kind of, just to kind of touch on that, the content creation and stuff, is that new to you, or have you kind of always been into it a little bit? Because I wasn't. This was like never would have thought to do any of this. Yeah. Even 6-7 months ago, as long as I've been doing it.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So relatively new, I'd say. I've been trying to get more into it personally and from a business perspective for the last couple of years. It's one of those things that's easy to kind of push off to the side in case of, in the case of other priorities that get in the way. But I'm sure, as you've seen in the last couple of years, Chris, it's become increasingly important and people spend more and more time on there. And I think that the big thing is just reminding people that you're there and what you do. Yeah. Just educating them, right? And people have very short attention spans as well, so I've been cognizant of that.
ADHD, man.
Yeah, I think we all do, right? So,
butterfly.
Yeah. We're trying to really focus on that. That was one of my key priorities with starting this business, is that, we're going to be there and we're going to be constant. We're going to be consistent in the social media space. So you can expect that to continue with us. And I've been focusing more so, I guess I've been focusing almost exclusively on the education piece, right? Yeah. And just keeping it simple, kind of bite-sized reels, short videos, just explaining, very simple things that brokers can then take and show to their clients or explain to their clients, examples of the deals that we would fund. So, you have something that matches that or something similar to that. Okay, maybe this is a fit for Keystone. So they flip us a note, right? So, it's a work in progress. I think it'll be a long-term work in progress, but it's coming along, and I find it's also getting easier now. Like, some of the tools are more intuitive to use out there. Just even, layering in music to your reels using like a Canva. I've, played around with that a lot recently, and it's, it takes time. You got to put some hours into it, but it becomes relatively intuitive once you play around with it enough.
Yeah, man. I mean, I definitely reverberate that. When I look back at some of my stuff, that I was like, all right, because Chandler, I would have met with him before Christmas last year. Anyway, the people are probably getting sick of this story. I think I told it a couple times, but I'll tell it again.
I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, right. And I watched one of his videos. I think it was on the Master Keys. And then I had a meeting with him, and it was very much around like, I was in my tail end of my second year, gonna get in my third in May. Wasn't super happy about my performance, but I play sports. I'm pretty competitive. Mm-hmm. I do, so I'm never where I really want to be anyway. Yeah. And the video was kind of like, hey man, this kind of, this time of year, you take stock in, your performance, life, and, you decide, am I happy with where I'm at, or do I need to make a change and move forward or pivot or whatever? And I was like, yeah, that hit me right in the feels. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm definitely not where I want to be. And I think at heart, I knew I wasn't doing enough. So anyway, I had the meeting. He's like, how's your social media? I was like, He's like, yeah. He's like, probably not doing enough, are you? I was like, no, I'm not. It's just like, I just admitted it there, right there. I was like, I'm not. Yeah. He's like, all right, well, you got to do it. And then he said it. My buddy Don said it. Somebody else said it. I can't put the name up. But anyway, it was like 3 strikes, you're out. Yeah. So I was just like, all right. I started making a plan. And it's like you say, once you look into it, it's pretty daunting. But then when you kind of, maybe ask a couple people. And I found even people on social media that do good reels and stuff. Like, you ask them, they'll tell you. Oh, yeah. It's no secret. Yeah. Like, anybody asks me, it's like, what do you use? Like, captions, CapCut, Canva. Yep. I was like, you got to do it. I'll give you all the stuff. Yeah. And to your point, it was choppy and clunky, and I felt like everybody was judging me every second of the, video. But then at the end of the day, it's like, well, it's your audience. They're there for you. So if they're judging you, then it's probably not the right audience anyway. Yeah. So if they end up leaving, then who cares? Yeah. Like, those aren't the people you want anyway.
You got to start somewhere too, right?
And it's like you say, the recency, like, I took psychology too as a minor in university. And it's like that recency kind of effect is real, man. Like, you could be, I mean, maybe not if you're my best friend, but like if we're just like, okay, kind of acquaintances, so to speak, and you meet another realtor at the gym and you guys have a good moment where you click and then you say something about buying a house and buddy's like, well, I can show you a house.
Yep.
You're showing a house with that guy 100%.
Yep.
Like I'm second rate by then. It's just sometimes it's the right place, right time too.
It is. And I think in general, social media is low hanging fruit. And that's what, real estate agents, brokers need to kind of see is that, you can do it at your desk at home, right? You don't have to go meet anybody.
Nope.
And like you said, you might have that intimidation of being judged the first couple times through it, but I found the same thing. You're recording videos of yourself, right? Like, it's a little intimidating. Like people are going to see this.
You're listening to yourself.
Yeah,
you sound like
super weird, right? But you do it a couple times, you just get used to it. It becomes second nature. It's and it pays off.
100%.
Right?
Do you know why? Because I had so many questions when I bought this house. I had so many questions, and I even knew my realtor like fairly well. Okay, I know him fairly well now. Maybe not so much then, but it was like, you hire somebody, you view them as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
A professional that knows heaps of information more than you would in the industry. So, like, I was almost scared to ask him questions. Like, he'd judge me for not knowing. Or, like, this dummy, asking these questions. That's just, like, the weird way my head works. So... And I'm sure for you, like, it's the educational piece. Like, I'm not there like, oh, look at me, look at my fancy thing. It's like very much like I didn't know the answers to these questions, so I'm going to give as much information out to the public or whoever's watching for free before you even call me.
Yep.
And that's my first commitment to you guys.
Yep.
You can come here, digest all my stuff. Doesn't cost you anything. Yep. To my best of my knowledge, everything I take and put out there is like 100%, from factual places and, vetted. I mean, maybe something slipped up that was like a misprint or a typo or whatever. But I think when you kind of just like create content with a purpose to like, help.
Absolutely.
I think people see that.
Yeah, and you also forget what people don't know, right? You just, you may talk to a group or you may have your collection of clients that you say, oh, well, they already know this, right? But, the other 90% of people watching you don't know it, right? So 100%. It's just a free opportunity to get in front of them and build trust, like you said, right? So,
and that's it. And that's the biggest thing I've been getting from people.
Yeah, exactly. They trust you as a professional,
right out the
like
gate.
You said.
Right out the gate.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because, you're speaking this to them, right? So why wouldn't they? And just to your point before that too, Chris, I mean, for agents and for brokers, from my perspective too, that are 1 or 2 years in, that's also constantly evolving. So there's constantly new people coming in, other people are leaving, but those first probably 1 to 3 years are crucial and the most challenging too, right? Because you're not just going to grow your business overnight. It takes time. It takes time to learn. It takes time to develop your client base, and it takes persistence through those couple of years. But, if you can layer in something like social media in the earlier days, that's going to make things easier for you because you're also, you're essentially educating yourself at the same time, right? Because you're doing the research. Exactly.
Right.
And
it's not just going
100%.
Ear, right?
And then you're going to think of these things when you're, talking to that client and that client's going to trust you, and that's going to, organically build out your network from that perspective too.
Yeah, man, you nailed it. I mean, it's not just like a one-way street. It's going in, and you can put it back out there when you need it. So it really develops like that initial trust up front. And then as you develop the relationship, and you have to, there's going to be hurdles that you're going to go through in this business, whether you're on the lending side
100%.
or there's house side. Be sure there's going to be at least one. And I mean, that's being conservative. So yeah, man, it's great. Like to be able to get that message out there, and especially for me, like I'll be honest, I'm not afraid to say it. When I watched that video with Chandler, like I really wasn't doing like enough stuff, and like I know people got their challenges and stuff, but I kind of lost a job, pandemic happened, really didn't enjoy. I'm sure most people didn't enjoy it, and everybody has their hardships, and then. I had a young dog that, he's our first dog. We had to put him down and, it was cancer, osteo, whole like amputated. It was a whole thing. Like, spent a bunch of money trying to say anyway. So I just wasn't in a headspace to even really like, and I'm a pretty like, I'll get it done, like kind of type guy. But I was just kind of, I had some severance money. Like I was, till you start running out of cash.
Sure.
Then you start getting motivated.
You gotta wake up, yeah.
And then the wife's talking about kids, and I'm like, holy shit. So then I was like, yeah, and I hear that video and I'm like, okay, I'm waking up.
Yeah.
But now, like you say, you get that big wheel turning, and like the first few years, like if I wasn't doing it, I'd just be drowned out by the new guys coming in. And there's some great guys doing great stuff out there, great content, very informational, informative, and it's all different too.
Yeah. I think it's a lot easier to focus and realize the need for that when you're off on your own, running your own business and your ass is on the line.
Yes, sir.
It makes it easier to say I need to do this rather than I could do this.
Right. And then the people that like say like, oh, I can't do that. It's like, no, you don't want to. Yeah. You can. Yep. Everybody can. It's just like you're afraid of the judgment, which is fine.
Yep.
I was there too.
Just got to get over that hump.
Absolutely. Yep. So back into the world of real estate after the little sidebar content thing, which is great. I love it too. So keep doing it. Because I like to learn. That's, everybody's on their phones too. Like you look at sports games, they're not even watching. They're just doing this.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, and just kind of one final comment on this too. I mean, when I came into the industry, and that's only, just over 6 years ago, it was still, and, to a certain extent, it still is in some ways, but, still like the PowerPoint presentation where you're educating, you get a group of people together.
Yeah.
You go through 20 slides or 15 slides or whatever it is. And sometimes you get some good back and forth, but it's evolved a lot, and even more so in the last couple of years through COVID. Like you said, everybody's on their phone all the time. Attention spans are very short, and it's just easier, using social media, not to necessarily replace that, but in addition to that, where you're only, asking for 20 or 30 seconds of attention and getting like a key insight across, rather than holding them hostage for half an hour and kind of going through 10 different things.
That'd be great if it was half hour.
Yeah, exactly. Or longer, right? So, and they might only retain one or two nuggets from that, right? So, it's just, I've seen that major shift, and it just kind of further reinforces how important it is to be in front of them that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember, those friggin', I'm sure you've done the Pepsi ones. Like I'd go to head office meetings on 160 Bloor, and we'd go in that friggin' conference room, and that's the only thing you'd see till the end of the day. Man, I hope he's listening, because it's funny, man. Because, he was 60, I don't know, he's not 65 yet. But anyway, he's an older guy when, when I was there, and I'm like, 21.
Yeah.
Like, and he's like, all right, make sure you pay attention. Next thing I'm looking, he's just
done.
Like, like by slide 17, you've lost everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how captivating you are.
Yeah.
And like, your slideshow isn't going to be as good as somebody's like reel on Instagram.
100%. And I was referring to the 15, 20 page decks from more so in my real estate time, back to my consumer goods times.
That's just what it brought.
I can remember
50,
Pepsi, maybe 100. Like 200 page decks, and you're
innovation.
Right, a full day in the room together, just going through this, and it's just like,
I want to take this pencil and stab it in my eye.
Exactly. Like, how can you expect to retain attention that long? You just can't, and you feel bad for the people who are presenting later in the day or whatever too, right? It's just like,
nobody's listening.
Yeah,
I don't got anything. I don't got no more juice for you, bro.
This way anymore. Yeah, so
I got no squeeze left.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, no, absolutely. But back on the kind of the real estate and the kind of the landscape of the market, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously we kind of took another 50 bips twice right on the chin.
Yep.
So rates are definitely, we had a little pause, couple hikes. Can you speak to kind of where the landscape of things is kind of looking like it's going? Do we, 6 months ago we were hoping for relief, and now we're like, we got to pause, and then, the job market took a little spike, and that's not good for inflation. Are we, in your opinion, like, are we doing the right stuff? Is these interest rate hikes doing what they're supposed to do? Because I don't know.
I think the only thing we can say for certain in the last couple of years is that nobody has a crystal ball.
Right. That's my go-to thing.
I would have said a couple months ago that they would have paused rate hikes, and I think we've had two since then. So it's really hard to say. I think if you read the news now, they're speculating, there might be one more, there might not be, and then it's likely paused indefinitely throughout 2024. And then depending on how things go with inflation, it could be late 2024, it could be early 2025 before we see any relief. I'll comment just from a private lending perspective, how it's kind of affected us. I'd say historically, any volatility in rates has driven more business to alternative and private lending.
Why would you say?
Just because people, whether they either speculate that rates are going to go up or down, they may be more reluctant to lock in for a longer period of time. And so they may want that temporary fix with private lending. Like I said, it's, an open term, or they can easily kind of get out of that if they need to. And also more recently with the massive increases we've seen, prime lenders have gone from, average rates in like the 2 to 3% to the 5 to 7% now, right? So that gets a lot closer. We're more so in the 10 to 13% from a rate perspective.
Sure.
But it hasn't increased as much. It maybe has gone up by 100 beeps, whereas the rest of the market's gone up by maybe 300 beeps. So
your premium's not as premium
exactly,
as it used to be.
Exactly. It's converged a little bit closer together, which makes it a little bit more palatable. The gap's closed. And like I mentioned, with interest-only payments versus principal plus interest, your monthly payments are also very similar.
Right.
So, you may, and I've heard, just from dealing with a lot of mortgage broker partners, a lot more clients are selecting shorter terms, like a 3-year term, to kind of just wait this out and then refinance, once they speculate rates are going to go down at that point, rather than locking in, at a high rate for 5 years. And that's, another reason why we've seen more come our way for short-term type stuff, just, speculating that that'll correct in the next couple of years, but really hard to say where it's going at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And basically what I anticipated for an answer, where you got to throw it out there. Maybe somebody's got a nugget I don't know about, right?
Yeah.
But it's I'm actually curious to ask, for my own information. And you kind of mentioned, people are taking shorter terms, seeing like what's going to happen. Because we were, when I first looked into kind of the housing and buying a house and interest rates, I knew nothing. Yeah. Like I grew up, blue collar fisherman. It was like, we got enough bank account money in the bank account to pay the bills, buy groceries, and some left. Okay, cool. So like when I started into this, I had kind of no idea. Yeah. Totally lost my train of thought though. I'm trying to gather everything up. What were we saying?
I lost it too.
Yeah. Shoot. Oh,
it's all good. We were talking rates. Talking rates. Yeah.
Rates.
Volatility in rates. Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. I should remember. So volatility in rates. No, I'll cut the dead space out. But when I started looking into it, I kind of had no idea where to start. And it's very much so with like the looking for the house part. And coming from kind of, rural Nova Scotia, you always thought the bank was who had your best interest in mind. So when I come up to the city, the big city from Yarmouth County, when I did my education at St. Mary's, and kind of, stayed up here since, my wife, we moved in together. She didn't want to rent, seen it as a waste. Fair enough. Want to buy a house. Yep. We started looking at, where to start. Again, didn't know. And like, mortgage brokers, like third party kind of, it was like, oh, no, that can't be as good as the bank. Yep. So you kind of never went there. So that was kind of like, I think, and not to say, people that work for the bank, I'm sure I might get roasted a little bit. Like, you guys are all awesome. You do great. But I kind of started to realize, well, if you work for the bank, you work for the best interest of the bank because they have shareholders and you have to work within their best interest. Whereas like the mortgage broker or a private lending group like yourselves, like you guys kind of work with what's in the best interest of the client and what's going to work best for them. And you deliver that product. So I guess like what I'm... long way around to my question is like, we're up for refinance in a couple of years. And it's like, what do you do? We used to go 5 years fixed term, boom, lock it in, forget it. But like back in the day, rates were whatever, 3.9, they were reasonable. And it was what it was. Like you weren't like, oh, rates are super high now. It was just like, whatever, it is what it is. And we dealt with it. Yeah. Whereas like now you're trying to be like, because we got the Airbnb that I was telling you about, and we put a HELOC out on the value of this, which is at 450 without an appraisal.
Yeah.
So we kind of got some cash to go. But I was thinking like, what's the best play? In 2 years' time, you kind of wait, finish these renos, send them to, get an assessor in to reassess it. Yep. And then do you kind of go a 3 at, anyway, that's kind of the question is like, where do you go and what are people mostly doing now? Because you kind of breezed over it is like, are they trying to ride it out to see if they can kind of catch a break on a rate and take a shorter term? Like, what is the strategy these days people are going to?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Chris, because I love talking about this. And when I bought my first house a couple of years back
I might take some notes
in Halifax, I was the same way. I grew up thinking you got to go to your bank. You got to go to your bank for a mortgage, even though I was coming into an industry with dealing with mortgage brokers. So I made that mistake dealing with my bank, and it was like pulling teeth trying to get any information out of it.
Right.
Everything happened at the very last minute. No clue if I get the best rate. Don't know, because they were the only option. So
because they don't have their products.
And you mentioned, being from a rural community, it's not only an issue in rural communities, it's also an Atlantic Canadian thing. And I'd say a Canadian thing in general, but if you look at the data, bank share is higher in Atlantic Canada than it would be in other areas of Canada in terms of versus broker share.
Okay. Because of not misinformation, but
exactly. It's the way it always was. It's what my parents did. It's what my grandparents did, right?
Yeah.
So this is just the way you do business.
It's good enough for me. It's good enough for them.
Exactly.
Right?
But this is just couldn't be further from the truth. So, and I've learned this, dealing with brokers for the last several years. And in the simplest terms, a broker has access to 20 plus different lenders. Right? It's as simple as that. Whereas your bank, if you go to CIBC or Scotiabank, they've got one option. It's whatever they offer, right? And that's it. If you're fit, great. If you're not, go somewhere else. And you have nothing to compare it to, nothing to benchmark to, right? So if you go to a broker and you find a good broker, and anybody who's listening to this, I'm more than happy to refer. We have amazing broker partners across Atlantic. I know a lot of great ones. You go to them, and like I said, they can do the strategic view, the long-term view for what you want to do. If you've got an Airbnb, if you've got a rental portfolio, if you want to renew, if you want flexibility, if you want to have a line of credit that you can access for renovations or for whatever reason, they've got so many different lenders and so much more flexibility. It just makes a logical sense to reach out to a broker and explore the options that are available with them. In terms of, what's the best option going forward, my answer would be talk to a broker because they're the expert.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, we're one lender, and, we're a strategic fit, whether it's real estate investors, like I mentioned, self-employed individuals, bridge financing. We do a lot of clients who have CRA debt. Some lenders don't like to pay out CRA debt. We're happy to leverage home equity to pay out CRA debt, and then people can usually refinance a lot easier after that's paid out. But speaking with the broker, there's tons of amazing brokers in HRM and across Atlantic Canada. That's where you want to start.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's it's kind of always like, where do you everybody's trying to time the market and do the right thing. And it's like, all rates are going to go down. Next thing they're going up. And it's like, Trudeau said they'd never go up. And, and here we are. Yeah. Like, what are we, 10 hikes now? 10?
I think so. I lost track.
Yeah, right. Who's counting? Yeah. We'll count on the way down. How about that?
Yeah, that'll be good.
But anyway, man, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you mentioned you were kind of doing some work in Toronto. You kind of, hammered that. Why'd you end up back here? What pulled you back here? That's kind of one of the big questions. We're the Halifax Network. We promote, local Halifax business and folks and products. And it's important to us that, we have our folks here, and we're always curious to know. And by we, I mean I. Yeah. I'm always curious to know, what pulls you here? Because I can't see myself being anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up in Moncton. I don't think I mentioned that. I was born in Halifax, but moved to Moncton at a young age.
Okay, cool.
I grew up there, went to UMB in Fredericton,
nice.
And then
moved
to Ontario. No, I'm not.
Okay, cool. I am.
A little bit. I did immersion growing up.
Okay,
cool. But yeah, just enough to get by. So I grew up in New Brunswick, always had close ties with family in the Halifax area, and always kind of dreamed of coming back east as well. It's challenging though, once you get locked into, Toronto and Ontario, and, there's way more job opportunities. It just is what it is. The scale of the city and the opportunities are much bigger there. You know, it's tough to find jobs. It's tough to find jobs in general out here, or at least historically. That's changing now, but and it's also tough to find jobs that pay as well out here. So I was fortunate to have the opportunity to join a family business and, you know, be able to have that opportunity to kind of prove myself in a new industry. I was also fortunate enough to convince my wife to move with me because she's a Torontonian.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That took a couple years of wrangling, but I know she's
made it though.
Yeah, it was you know, maybe a bit of a challenging start when we first moved here with a young kid. But
shout out to wifey, we made it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aaliyah. But you know, after a couple of years, it's you know, she loves it now. We both love it now. We've got established networks here. Our kids are in school. They're in French school actually, so they'll learn better French than I ever knew. But you know, it's been amazing, and we're so happy we're back. One thing I didn't mention that's super obvious too is just cost of living.
Yeah,
you know, with a young family, you know, we wanted to be able to buy real estate in Toronto. It was not possible from a down payment perspective, even back then. Even less so now.
Right.
And when we moved to Halifax, we were kind of lucky. It was before the boom here, so we were able to invest in a property.
So you even got a little equity.
Yeah, so we got a little equity that way, which worked really well in our favor.
Perfect.
But yeah, now that we're settled here, it's amazing. We'll never go back. I'd say that, you know, I probably miss Toronto more than my wife does at this point.
Really?
But
what do you miss the most about it?
You know what? I loved living there. I'm a diehard sports fan, so I'm a Leafs fan, unfortunately.
Me too, unfortunately.
Yeah, but
I question it every
year.
But
Yeah, I'm a Jays fan too.
Yeah, I'm Toronto everything except
Toronto
for
everything.
football,
Okay, right on, my man. My claim to fame is that I was at the bat flip game, the Bautista bat flip.
Oh, nice! I have a Bautista jersey. Yeah.
So. You know, those experiences, obviously you can't get that in, you know, a bit of a smaller city in Halifax, maybe someday.
The Mooseheads
but
just don't cut it. Sorry, they're great. But
you know, the Mooseheads are great. My kids love that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that, you know, a bit, and the culture and the restaurants and stuff like that, the diversity there. Halifax has come a long way though in the last several years.
Big time. For sure.
So I'm not complaining. I get back to visit Toronto a couple times a year anyways, and that's usually enough. You know, I deal with traffic, you know, trying to go 5 kilometers and it takes you an hour. And then you're like, this is, you know, this is why I left and went back, went back east. So,
man, I remember, I love it. Yeah, man. Well, super glad to have you. And my buddy Brian, we used to carpool before we wrap it up. He's from Oakville, Ontario. I started at Xerox in 2012, right? We used to Xerox on Brownlow down in Dartmouth. Yep. It was actually next door. A Pedway connected Unilever and Xerox. Okay. That's how I ended up there.
Oh, cool.
But anyway, I remember like I lived on McLean Street right down in the south end with my brother and a few roommates. And then he was on Queen Street, and we used to carpool because we were just broke, fresh out of university. Sure. So we're like, we're going to make this cheap as we can.
Yep.
But when gas was actually reasonable. And man, on the way there, it'd be like, phew, nobody was in a rush to get to work. But on the way back over that bridge, man, there was at least one accident. And it would just like, I just wanted to get home and do stuff with my friends at that age, you know, 20, 21, just out of university.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was like a putting in code to a computer, and it was just like, no, wrong. Like it was just, it's like, man, you wouldn't last a second in Ontario.
No, and that's it too. Like you get used to living out here. And now if I've got to deal with 30 seconds of traffic, you start to feel that road rage build, man, right?
Yes.
So.
But man, you can tell there's way more people here than even just 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
You can see it on the road.
Totally. Completely
everywhere.
Changed.
Yeah. Just like that. Boom.
Hopefully the infrastructure can keep up.
I know. Friggin' infrastructure. Mm-hmm. We need it.
We do.
All right, man. Well, I know you got to get going. We've done like 48 minutes, and I promised you inside of an hour. So
awesome.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Yeah.
Super appreciate it. Thanks for filling me in on private lending and a little bit about yourself. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Appreciate it, Chris. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks so much. Cheers.